Good day, everyone. Today, we will be presenting our paper entitled Improving the Internal MOA Procedure, an Action Research and Humanistic Intervention for the CSO MNL Committee.
To begin, let me introduce you to some of the primary stakeholders involved in this action research. First and foremost, we have the Council of Student Organizations. CSO serves as the main organization to be studied in this research. Primarily, CSO serves as the mother organization for the 48 accredited student-led organizations within De La Salle University. Currently in its 46th iteration, they are responsible for guiding the organizations in processing various documents such as pre-activity and post-activity requirements. Aside from this, they also serve as the bridge between the organizations and the Office of Student Life in terms of necessary information and guidelines dictated by the office. Speaking of S-Life, they are the governing administrative body of various student-led groups such as CSO and the university student government. They are responsible for publishing guidelines and mandates that the various organizations must adhere to. For this research-specific committee within CSO to be tackled would be the Marketing and Linkages Committee. Their main responsibility is to review and filter the many memorandum of agreements or MOAs submitted by the organizations under the council. Lastly would be the Office of the University Legal Counsel. They serve as the official legal office of DLSU and are involved with the official review of external MOAs submitted by the organizations. Diving right into the purpose and rationale of this action research, we have the overview of the issue. The topic we wanted to tackle was the MOA checking process of CSO. To provide context, this responsibility is relatively new as it was only implemented during the recently concluded 46th Council by myself personally, the Vice Chairperson for MNL. I implemented this with the goal of being able to assist CSO organizations and S-Life by initially reviewing MOA submissions from the organizations as well as in the hopes of maximizing my committee and providing them with fulfilling work. Now, given the nature of this as a newly implemented process, there have definitely been a few hitches and challenges throughout the year. With that, even as my term as the VC for MNL concludes, I want to be able to continuously improve MNL's processes by identifying areas for improvement and optimizing the process for the future council. With that, the significance of this action research lies with being able to identify points for improvement in the process of MNL's MOA review process, improving the MNL committee's service for the CSO organizations, and of course, utilizing my position as the vice chairperson for MNL to maximize the implementation of this action research.
The action research paper used two theories, namely goal setting theory and flow theory. The goal setting theory was proposed by Locke, which identifies factors that motivate and guide individuals in pursuing a goal. We will be focusing on its two classic variables, which are clarity and feedback. Clarity deals with having specific and measurable factors that allows individuals to focus on precise actions in achieving goals, while feedback deals with providing progression to assess the status of goals. For both under goal setting theory and flow theory, challenge deals with creating difficult goals to motivate individuals to raise performance. A person is more likely to experience flow when they perceive that a challenge meets their skills.
Meanwhile, the flow theory was first introduced by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which argues that individuals experience a holistic experience when they are in the flow. Flow means that a person is fully immersed or involved in a certain event or activity. For this action research paper, instead of individual flow, we will be focusing on team flow, which shows a collective flow experience derived from optimized team dynamics, where each team member simultaneously and collectively experiences flow while executing tasks toward a common goal. There are several prerequisites to achieve team flow, and we will be focusing on high-skill integration and safety, as the other prerequisites overlap the goal-setting theory. High-skill integration means that each team member's skills are compatible with one another to create a synergetic collaboration towards the common goal. while safety means that the environment allows for risk-taking, learning, and growth. When these prerequisites are present, team flow characteristics will naturally occur. As team members experience this momentum at work, individuals tend to thrive. When the team is motivated to work, the team members will be motivated to repeat activity, will have higher productivity, and stronger organizational commitment. Thus, in our conceptual framework, the variables clarity, feedback, challenge, skill, and safety are directly related to team flow to achieve our desired outcomes of minimizing internal MOA corrections and increasing organization collaboration.
As for the methodology, action research is a systematic and cyclical process of meaningful investigation to improve an identified problem. The process begins at the pre-step where the context is being laid out before the actual process. The next step would be the constructing, which involves diving into the issue deeper and gathering more information regarding the situation. Next is the planning action, where an action plan would be established. This step is followed by the taking action, which refers to the phase where the action plan created would be used to execute the necessary intervention. And lastly, the evaluating action, which is the phase where feedback would be analyzed regarding the process. The cycle would go on until the desired outcome is reached. Using what was mentioned as basis, the pre-step would be the identification that numerous individuals are committing negligible errors in the drafting of internal MOAs, which is followed by the construction phase, where the proponents gather more information regarding the issue. The next step would be the planning phase, where a step-by-step process is being conceptualized. This would then be followed by the taking action, which refers to the stage where the action plan would be initialized. And lastly, the evaluation stage, where feedback regarding the conducted intervention would be analyzed to understand further what could be improved in the overall process.
We begin the first cycle with the constructing stage. The first step we took upon assignment of this action research was to gather and brainstorm on what organizations we can use for this research. We arrived at two potential organizations wherein we can have influence on in terms of enacting change: CSO and the Business Management Society. Presented here is an orgi cycle that led us to eventually deciding on CSO over BMS. For observation, we were able to identify how we had connections within both BMS, stemming from Sam's position as a vice president for documentations, and within CSO as well, as my position as the vice chairperson for marketing and linkages. It was clear that there was reluctance from the both of us to willingly offer our organization as the topic for research. We attributed this to the perceived difficulty and resistance to change from both organizations, not to mention the additional responsibilities to be shouldered. Reactions to our reluctance were our attempts to explore other options outside of BMS and CSO. However, we could not identify any feasible alternatives that we would have an influential position in to implement an intervention. With that, our judgment led us to the realization that our reluctance to offer one of our organizations as the topic of the research was due to the potential of having unsuccessful plans that may have a direct effect on our organizations. Additionally, we agreed that of the options, BMS would be more difficult to implement changes given their organizational culture. Lastly, for our intervention, we collectively agreed to have CSO and specifically the MNL committee as the focal point of our action research. Even amidst the reluctance, I was extremely eager to get to work with people to improve the MNL committee, and Sam was also excited to potentially improve the services of CSO, services that she can directly benefit from as well. Now that we have settled on the organization to be used, the next step was identifying areas for improvement. In order to do so, we used a ladder of inference to organize our thoughts and discussions. A common observation that we had was that the MOA reviewing process was specific, tedious, and had constant changes throughout the year that made it a process that was difficult to keep up with. With that, the data that we retained was there was plenty of room for improvement in the process. But given the extensive nature of the process, it was vital to identify a certain step that we can implement an intervention in to ensure feasibility. Limitations such as constantly changing processes, time frame, and stakeholders such as S-Life and OULC were some assumptions that we had to take into account. At that point, we concluded that any change implemented would have to be within the internal MOA process, given the difficulty of coordinating with OULC for any desired changes in the external MOA process. The beliefs we settled on was that revising the internal MOA templates would be the most feasible actions, as systematic changes are not feasible given the provided time frame as well as the constantly renewed guidelines regarding the processes. At the end of the day, the desired action we arrived at was to improve the internal MOA template. Before we move further, it's important to provide some context, specifically with the differences of internal and external MOAs that were previously mentioned, and why we decided to focus on internal MOAs specifically. Internal MOAs are contracts between two organizations within DLSU, while external MOAs are contracts between an organization within the university and any partner or sponsor from outside of DLSU. The critical difference that we had to take into account would be the involvement of OULC in the external MOA process. Given the nature of OULC and their strict adherence to their guidelines and policies, we wanted to veer away from planning interventions in the external MOA context as we anticipated the difficulties of having them implemented. Given these constraints, the internal MOA process is what we decided to focus on. Moving on, we have the planning phase where we decided our desired outcomes for this action research. First would be to minimize internal MOA corrections, and second, to increase collaboration among organizations. We utilized a force field analysis to identify driving and hindering forces towards these desired outcomes. Driving forces included feedback from stakeholders such as ourselves and various other organization representatives to provide us insights for improvement, as well as our proposal of creating and implementing a simplified MOA template. Hence the dotted arrow, as at this stage it was merely a proposal of ours. On the other hand, hindering forces identified are the inconvenience of having to process paperwork, expected challenges during implementation, such as with distribution of the new template, and the reluctance of organizations to collaborate in providing their feedback. Given this, being able to provide a simpler MOA template serves the strongest driving force, as by doing so, hopefully it will lead to organizations having an easier time drafting their internal MOAs, leading to less mistakes. In relation, by providing better templates and making drafting paperwork easier, we aim to hopefully also increase the intent and willingness of organizations to collaborate with one another. After all the planning processes comes the implementation and taking action. First, for the creation of the new and improved internal MOA template, we revised it by including additional instructions in the form of comments on the Word file that points out frequent points for concern. The identified points were decided from Michael's first-hand experience reviewing MOAs, as well as Sam's experience drafting them. Moving on, we planned our pilot implementation to be during LEAP 2021, an annual event of CSO that requires organizations under the Council to organize alternative classes for the student body. We had anticipated that this would be an event with lots of partnerships among organizations to collaborate for their classes and events, thus making it an ideal opportunity to test out our implementation. However, surprisingly, there were 0 partnerships among organizations during the entirety of the event. With that, we had to fall back to our alternative implementation of directly publishing the new template for general use of the organizations under CSO.
For outcomes related to minimizing mistakes, presented are the results from comparing the amount of pended MOA submissions before and after June 12 using the improved internal MOA template. The results yielded that before implementation, around 24% of MOAs are being pended and only 22% were being pended after implementation. While there is a 2% improvement, we believe that this small amount of change is an insignificant amount and is unable to provide substantial data for us to conclude whether the new template was effective in minimizing mistakes. With regards to the survey and interview feedback after using the new MOA template, student leaders shared that the revised template is more specific and detailed compared to last term. It is better if comments are specified to lessen pens. A respondent also supports the idea by saying that the templates are extremely helpful with the nitty-gritty side of preparing internal partnerships. One respondent also mentioned that once student organizations get to familiarize with the template, it is more likely that they would not hesitate to partner because they know what to expect. They also shared that when having mistakes in MOA drafting, CSO informs immediately so that the team can correct it. A respondent also mentioned that the feedback within the team is helpful to correct mistakes. It helps with the succeeding MOA process to become more efficient. They also expressed that the challenge of processing internal MOAs comes when doing it for the first time, and it becomes easier over time given that the task is repetitive. Respondents mentioned that it challenged them to become keener to details, and having more experience with internal MOAs allows the team to lessen the previous mistakes. Overall, the simplified MOA template with specific instructions was effective to provide clarity in the MOA process and lessen the inconvenience of paperwork. We were also able to achieve the desired outcomes of minimizing mistakes through positive insights and feedback from the student leaders. It was also mentioned during the interview how student officer skills were challenged to become keener to details when using the template and led to the enhancements of their capabilities. Overall, the driving forces were sufficient in order to minimize mistakes despite the hindering forces.
Moving on to the outcomes related to collaboration. Since it is established based on statistics and the feedback provided by the respondents that the new and simplified MOA template is relatively effective, we wanted to further analyze whether the simplification of the MOA template also increased the organization's willingness to collaborate with other student organizations. Student leaders said that because the MOA had a clear template, it would be more motivating to make the documents to collaborate with other organizations. This statement informs that the simplified MOA template also has a positive effect on organizational collaboration in such a way that the clear MOA will help lessen the inconvenience that paperworks provide. Student leaders also mentioned the motivations they have to collaborate with other organizations, and they have mentioned that although the whole process is also personally rewarding to them because they can gain new learnings and develop their skills, extrinsic motivations still weigh more. It is supported by their statements, which say there are a few intrinsic motivations, such as the learnings that we will gain, but it is more on extrinsic because it is more about what the organizations will earn from the partnership, such as more reach for publicity and increased participants. One also mentioned that, in a way, collaborating with other organizations prepares us in the corporate world. If a company partners with another company, contracts will always be there, and this is a nice exercise on what we can expect when we graduate. However, despite providing different factors that motivate and drive them to collaborate, they also express the factors that hinder them from doing so. They mentioned that they consider other pressing factors such as difference in organizational culture and work ethics, as well as the limited partnership benefits. They believe that this greatly contributes to why collaborating is challenging. Student leaders shared that it is hard to communicate with other organizations, and it also depends on the people in charge of an event. Partnering with organizations is challenging. Communication and compliance can be difficult because even though there is one guideline, they are doing another thing. They also mentioned that sometimes other organizations have a lot of demands. Compared to the post-cycle force field analysis for minimizing mistakes, this figure shows that the simplified MOA template has a lower score as we concluded that the implemented intervention is not able to have a significant impact on being able to increase organizational collaboration, as other factors contributed more to this desired outcome. Together with the stakeholder feedback, it decreases the inconvenience of paperwork in just a certain extent. Intrinsic and extrinsic factors drive student leaders to collaborate, but these are hindered by organizational differences and limited partnership benefits. Overall, the driving forces are still somewhat stronger than the hindering force. While the simplified MOA helped to a certain extent, this is not the main factor that encouraged organizations to collaborate more with each other. Organizations are more likely to partner if the benefits, terms, and conditions of the partnership are worth it to both parties, and if the potential partner is quick to respond, easy to communicate with, and complies with the agreements, among others.
Moving on to meta learnings. First is content reflection. Reluctance and hesitation were definitely felt at the start of the action research process due to the uncertainties with the topic. Furthermore, minimizing the complexity of internal MOA processes is definitely a daunting task since it involves numerous stakeholders within the university. The gathering of data and information was fairly easy due to numerous individuals willing to be interviewed regarding their experiences and knowledge with the internal MOA processing. The first cycle definitely provided us with enough information which improved our overall understanding regarding the situation. Next is process reflection. As mentioned, there were hesitations on the initial process due to the intricacies of onboarding. However, through constant communication with other parties, we were able to gain a better understanding of how the processing of MOAs are being viewed by the general public and what are their ideas on how it could be improved. There was a point in the study where we got overconfident since we have conceptualized numerous ideas on how the process could be improved and how collaboration within organizations would follow. This, however, was an overshot since we were not able to take into account some of the parties involved in the process, like as life. Initially, it was difficult for us to stand on a neutral ground since we have our own biases and experiences regarding MOAs. However, this was resolved through numerous goal alignment and brainstorming sessions. And lastly, premise reflection. Early on in the study, the processing of MOAs has been described as having minimal connection to humanistic processes due to its bureaucratic nature. However, it was also mentioned that this was the natural perception since extrinsic motivation is almost always at play. Furthermore, interpersonal connections are also being utilized by organizations as a way to accelerate the processing of their documents. This in itself is an indication of how connections are able to build relationships within organizations since they are able to utilize them well for their benefit.
For the following section, we will be focusing on the discussion and extrapolation to the broader context. For clarity, it is evident that the revised internal MOA template better guided the student officers in MOA drafting, as the MOA template focused on providing specific and clear instructions. This implies that if individuals know what is expected from them, it increases their chances to reach desired goals. The presence of clarity allows student leaders to focus and follow precise actions to achieve the desired outcome of minimizing mistakes. Therefore, the simplification of the new MOA template successfully provided more clarity, which helped the student officers to further improve their performance. For feedback, we were able to gauge the effectiveness of the new internal MOA template through the insights garnered from the survey and interview. Feedback from stakeholders mentioned that having the new internal MOA template helped them lessen mistakes in MOA drafting compared to the last term. Even though there were only limited changes in the number of pens, the overall feedback implies that the new internal MOA was able to provide more clarity and ease in MOA drafting. This implies how feedback is truly essential to determine the intervention's current standing and areas for improvement.
To experience flow, there should be challenge and skill balance. The challenge in this activity may be seen from the difficulty they may experience from filling out the template to the approval of the said document. Respondents expressed that at first, there was an imbalance between the challenge that the process provided compared to the skills they had, causing more pens because of mistakes. However, through time and with the help of the changes made in the template, its difficulty became manageable and they now feel more confident performing the process. In relation to the challenge, the stakeholders' skills must match the difficulty of the MOA process to be able to efficiently perform it. The student leaders mentioned that they were able to enhance their skills throughout the process and that helped them perform better. Because they show a high level of skills that match the challenge, in time, they were able to lessen their mistakes and decrease the number of their pending MOAs. Having a high level of challenge means that there is a possibility for failure and team members should not be afraid to fail. To eliminate this fear, it is necessary to have a safe environment to do things. All the respondents agreed that they have a safe environment for learning. The team is very supportive and they help each other out while doing the process. It is believed that with the team flow prerequisites met and agreed upon by the stakeholders, flow occurred. Together with the new template that we implemented and the team flow prerequisites shown by the stakeholders, the desire to minimize the MOA template mistakes was achieved. Because the team had clear and specific goals, there was constant and timely feedback, there was a high challenge skill balance, and there is a safe environment for learning. The team was able to experience a sense of unity, focus, mutual trust, and joint progress, which positively affected their team dynamics and team efficiency, as well as individual growth. This shows that the improvement of the document was not the only factor that helped achieve the goal, but also the attitude of the student leaders throughout the process.
As for humanistic practices, in order to build a humanistic perspective, collaboration and inclusivity within all parties are required. However, it was mentioned by numerous participants that these factors nowadays are not the main drivers of collaboration since extrinsic factors are mainly at play. Extrinsic motivation pertains to the drive or motivation to do something due to external factors like monetary benefits, X deals, external feedback, and other forms of physical incentives. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, refers to the drive to perform an action for themselves. The optimized level of intrinsic motivation was labeled flow, which is often described by scientists as a desired state since actions are being made without hesitation and full of confidence. However, there are instances where extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation would overlap, and this is called motivational synergy. As an example, an individual's perception of himself is being developed due to the feedback that he has received. The presence of intrinsic motivation would improve the overall performance of an individual since they are less likely to be affected by changes. Furthermore, it was mentioned that intrinsic motivating factors are more sustainable since extrinsic factors are often limited to a specific set of time. Continuously advancing intrinsic factors as compared to extrinsic would further improve motivation, which would lead to organizational success and collaboration.
One of the effects of our intervention also leads to human flourishing, which fosters the development of human beings, including well being and continuous learning from others. The intervention will help individuals not just become efficient by minimizing mistakes, but also focus on their well being by preventing stress from possible pains and the enhancements of their skills. The limitation of inconvenience of paperwork can also be considered as a possible force that motivates student leaders to further increase collaboration. An increased sense of fulfillment is achieved when no revisions are being asked further and a boost of morale could be felt since their hard work paid off. Thriving at the overall MOA process could also lead teams to the state of being in the flow and experience a balance between their ability level and challenge.
One way for student organizations to build relationships with other student organizations is through partnerships. For partnerships to be official, a memorandum of agreement which includes the obligations and commitments of both parties, is created and signed. From the previous terms, it was analyzed that the pended MOAs often have similar reasons for pending, which are the minuscule errors organizations make when filling out the template, which then delays the whole process. To help resolve this, a new detailed MOA template was created based on feedback from stakeholders because they were aware of their goals, had open communication with their team, and they perceived those challenges of the MOA process met their skills, they experienced flow. However, because of the limited amount of time to implement the MOA template, only a limited amount of data was gathered. There was a 2% improvement in the average number of pending MOAs before and after the implementation date, but it is insignificant and its effectiveness cannot be fully verified. Moreover, from the positive feedback we have received regarding the new template, our first desired outcome of minimizing the internal MOA corrections was achieved. Based on this action research paper, we have noted that our second desired outcome of increasing organizational collaboration cannot be fully achieved solely with the streamlining of internal MOA process because the other factors that affect the said activity make it more difficult to partner. This is also evident when the respondents mention that it is more challenging to partner with organizations than the MOA process itself. Lastly, it is also important to note that the MOA process is not merely focused on the operational perspective, but the process also has a positive effect on the development of stakeholders. In this case, we see the intervention led to human flourishing as the stakeholders learned new skills, experienced less stress because of lesser pending MOAs, and motivated people to work harder among others. This shows that it is also necessary to know that documents are not the only thing that should be improved, but also how this will benefit its stakeholders.
It is recommended to officially use the MOA template in the next academic school year, seeing its positive feedback. Future research can also use other theories such as the social cognitive theory to better study the reciprocal interaction between person, environment, and behavior during the MOA process. This theory could also dwell further on the factors that affect collaboration. Lastly, future studies can consider doing an in-depth analysis on tackling the external MOA procedure and having more collaboration with OULC and SLife in having a more seamless MOA process for both parties. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening.